I'm Susan, and in my previous video I took one of the ugliest old canvases I have ever painted, which was a practice canvas a few years ago, maybe 6 or 8 years ago, I don't remember, but I was playing with my paints and learning as I went, and it got worse and worse, and I stuck it away as a start, and I thought maybe someday I would come back to it. I have so many of those canvases. But anyway, I picked one of the ugliest ones I've ever done. And in my previous video, which will be linked below in the comments, I transformed that painting into partway through this painting. So I got really pretty far in about 40 minutes, which is condensed down to about a 10-minute video. So check out my comments below and watch that. But the video you're about to see is phase 2. I lived with that painting for a couple of days, and I felt like it wasn't quite there yet. So after a couple of days, I pulled it back out, and yesterday, in preparation for a show I'm about to enter, I added a few touches to it. And you're about to see that time lapse. It will only be another few minute video, but this was me cracking this painting together. This is an Indian firethorn, and that's what I wanted to do with this abstracted floral. So join me. Okay, here we go, and first of all I want to apologize because of the popping and crackling in my introduction there. I am trying to troubleshoot what's going on with my microphone. I think it might simply be my fan and air conditioner moving the air around, but we'll see when this finishes. I hope it improves. I'm painting intuitively, trying to crack this one into final form. This was about another half hour of a painting session, and I think I've finished it, and in fact I varnished it, and we'll show you the varnished version at the end. It's remarkable how varnish will bring particularly the dark and the bright colors into life. They sort of die when they dry, and the varnish brings them back to life. I'm sort of referring to the Indian Paintbrush photo that I have from a live painting session that I did. I did a class a couple of weeks ago called In Celebration of Flowers, and everybody who participated in that class brought a bouquet of flowers, and we had two big tables full of flowers. It was just glorious. We sketched and we painted. And so this photo is from that batch of Texas wildflowers. And I wanted to do an intuitive floral painting of these Texas wildflowers in somewhat of a big format. This painting is, I believe, 24 by 24 inch square gallery wrapped canvas. As I said in my intro, the first session of painting this is linked. It's the YouTube video version of it is linked below in the comments. So I took a really old, nasty, ugly canvas that I had painted many years ago, experimenting with my tools and acrylics, and I grabbed that and just painted over it and transformed it into this floral. Here I'm just adding some shapes that to me sort of say leaf shapes, background shapes. I like the feeling of looking through the garden at a bird's eye view, or let's say a bumblebee's view in and around the floral shapes and the stems. I like the feeling of looking through the garden. I'm painting with a limited palette, and I stuck with that palette from the first session. I'm using, in this case, and I often do, use bottles. I've put my Nova Color paints into bottles for easy application to my palette. And there you saw me squeeze out a little more paint. I'm using, let's see, cadmium yellow medium. I'm using cadmium red light, basically, with a little bit of pyrrole red. And one of my very favorite greens is the Nova Color Deep Green. It's a very rich green that you see there, and it's a fairly pure form as my darkest darks. And then the rest of the greens are a mix with my cadmium yellow medium and a little Hansa yellow I believe I used here and there. At least in the first half I used some Hansa yellow. And my white there on my palette is gesso. I often use gesso when I want some opacity to my white. Titanium white has opacity, but in fluid form, these Nova colors are fairly fluid, and it doesn't quite have the coverage, the opacity that I'm looking for. I like a really rich opaque, so I'm using gesso instead. I'm really not painting from that photo reference. I'm just getting inspiration from it. The Indian paintbrush is such a beautiful wildflower here in Texas, along with the bluebonnets. They bloom for just a few weeks in the early spring when it's still somewhat cool, and they die out once it gets hot. So this is the time of year that we can catch some of our wildflowers along the highways in the countryside. I'm using a brush that is referred to as a cat's tongue. It's sort of got a round tip, and it's one that I like to use to put finishing touches on my florals. The greens, the dark greens, sort of die away on the paper or canvas as they dry, and I really appreciate how a layer of varnish brings them back to life again. The same thing happens with oils. It takes longer for oils to dry, obviously, but once they're dry, the darks, whether it's black or green or the very dark darks, tend to fade a little bit or die away in terms of the vibrancy, and varnish brings them back to life again as though they're wet. And I do love the vibrant colors. I work fairly quickly and intuitively. I don't like to labor over my paintings because they get tight, and I'm after a loosely rendered gestural painting. I want the impression of these Indian paintbrushes, not a photograph of them. Now, I've decided that some of these forms need to be a little bit bigger. I wanted the red passage to get a little bit larger because it felt to me like my forms were a little bit spotty and maybe a little bit too much the same in terms of size and shape. So I'm connecting some of my red shapes, and I feel like it makes for a stronger composition. There's no right or wrong when you're painting intuitively. I can't explain why I'm putting any of these marks down. I wanted some of the colors to travel around the canvas a little bit. And I take a lot of pleasure in having a lot of wet paint, a variety of colors on my paintbrush. So I love to go in and turn my paintbrush around as I'm painting so that the colors mingle on the canvas from my brush. Here I'm splashing some wet color. I'm literally splashing it on because I wanted the color to go on in an unusual way, and I really love the idea of little blobs of paint inexplicably. To me, it reads like a painting when I spill a little paint around. I don't know why I like that mark, but I do. So I will thank you for joining me, and stay tuned for my next video.